Good afternoon. I think we'll get started. And if folks want to make their way to the front, there's some open seats up here. It's always nice to fill in the chairs up here. There's a nice breeze, and you'll have really good access to the bar right when we finish. Well, thanks everyone for coming to this discussion around personalization and privacy. I think this is a topic that is near and dear to many of our hearts and is changing very rapidly, especially over the last few months. So very excited to be here. I'm Maureen. I'm a senior partner at Bain Company. I spend most of my time thinking about marketing and customer experience. And I'm here with Laurel Rossi from Infillion, Tom Butta, the CMO and Chief Strategy Officer for Airship, and Zubin Mowlavi, the EVP of Commerce for VaynerX. So thanks all for being here. Maybe you could just give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll get started.
Fantastic. Thank you. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Infillion, as Maureen had mentioned, and we are excited to be hosting this week because we think the conversations around media marketing and technology are richer than ever. You may notice we're also sponsoring something called the Inclusion Cafe, and we have had a number of conversations already today, fascinating, about diversity in our industry and putting action, to those thoughts and experiences. And I'm so happy to be here with my colleagues and partners today. Thank you for having me on the panel.
Hi, I'm Tom Butta. Thanks for including old white guys too, I guess. I always remember I used to be the youngest guy in the room, and something happened along the years, right? But the arc of my career has been really to work for what I call challenger brands. So companies that have really disrupted the norm. And most of those companies have been software companies. And Airship is very much one of those. What Airship does is it basically helps brands optimize their mobile app experience for their customers. It's a value creation playbook where the app customers are typically worth 3 to 4 times all other customers. And so that is kind of a radical point of view for most classic marketers, agencies, and product teams. So my job is to help educate the market and bring more value to the businesses we serve.
Lovely to meet you all. I'm Zubin, EVP Commerce at Vayner. And from our perspective, and similar to the themes of the conversation today, we work with many brands that are trying to achieve commerce, both online, retail, and whatnot. And I think one of the points of view that we have that's somewhat different is around meaningful value and the meaningful value these products provide consumers and how you can actually market to folks and understand what it is that they value so that your products can enhance their lives. Now, you end up in a scenario where, and which is wonderful, and very happy to be here today because privacy and personalization, while they go hand in hand, they often compete with one another and they prevent one another from actually being achieved. And so I'm excited to have that conversation with you today and pleased to be here.
Thank you. So let me start with a question, which is really, what do you think the biggest myths out there are today about consumers and privacy? And Tom, starting with you, I know Airship recently conducted a survey of, I believe, 11,000 global customers about their attitudes about privacy. And what it found was that they really didn't want to share their data in the places that marketers most want to get it. And so what does that mean, and how do you think about advising companies in that context?
Yeah, so we've done this survey now year over year. So last year it was 9,139 people, and this year it's over 11,000 across the globe. So it was not only privacy that we probed, but also the broad theme of personalization. What's interesting is that people are willing to share, I talk about people, we are willing to share a lot of information. And that as long as it's treated in a respectful way and there's some level of reward. It doesn't necessarily mean discounts. It just means perhaps rewarding me for my loyalty or rewarding me to have a special look at something before perhaps it's out there. On the other hand, people are saying that they hate, here's some information, people are saying that they really dislike when you are mining that data as opposed to minding the relationship. So if people are saying, 78% of people are saying, I would love for you to understand my interests and help me optimize against that, only 44% of those people are saying, hey, do not tap into what I'm putting out there on social media. That's for me personally. I'm willing to share what I think about social issues, but when it comes to my social profile, that's very personal. It gets a little creepy if you follow up on that. So those are just a couple of examples.
And so, Zubin, in that context, from the agency side, as your clients are encountering these consumer, preferences, how do you advise your clients in that context?
Well, I think what Tom brings up is really interesting, which is like, if I'm friends with you and I share something with you, don't share it with Tom unless I share it with Tom, right? So this is like human nature. We have relationships and we want to maintain those relationships. So the question is, what relationship do you have with the consumer? The challenge, though, is that for the last 20 years or so, brands haven't had relationships with their consumers. The relationships have been with marketplaces and retailers. And so what we advise clients to do is, regardless of your aspiration to have a direct-to-consumer sales channel, focus on that direct-to-consumer site. Because what you need to do is maintain or establish and create a relationship with the consumers that love your products. And don't look at that .com as a discrete sales channel, but as an opportunity to create that relationship that your consumer wants with you, and in turn get the relationship you want with them.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. In my own work, I talk about customer love, and so I think it's very appropriate when you say they have to love your site. If the customer and the consumer really appreciates what you do and trusts you, it's a whole different story. But I guess turning the table a little bit, Laurel, your platform uses different kinds of data. So it's all about using targeting data that the consumer has said they're okay with sharing. And how does this improve the effectiveness of ads when you're working with the data that the consumer has self-selected or proactively chosen to share?
Yeah, so we come at it from a couple of different standpoints. On the media side, we are sharing the data in the way that you describe. And then on the location side of our business, we also have an opportunity, because it's also opt-in, to really understand the trends that are happening in their lives. And I think the relevance factor is super important. Tom talked about his study. We compare notes all the time. We work very closely with Airship in-app, especially, and do some really nice work together. And I think where all of this intersects with the work that Vayner's doing is, as an example, is that data, once the consumer has opted in and told us exactly what they want, we feel like we not only have an obligation to safeguard it, but also to share it in a highly relevant way. That also means that looking at patterns as opposed to being creepy, as Tom likes to say, is really way more important. And we feel an obligation to add a layer of insightfulness. And so it's not just about the data itself, but it's about what we do with that data and how we actually take it to our customers.
If I might just
please.
add something. So when we talk about sharing location data, here's what not to do. So if somebody downloads their app, you advertise, download the app for the good stuff, right? They download the app, and the first question you ask them is, will you share your location? People are saying, no, you haven't given me enough context for that. But after you have built a relationship, one of the biggest places that people want to actually want you to know where they are, is in a store. So just watch a Home Depot commercial these days. Home Depot's commercial is all about their app experience, because people have been lost in terms of in this big box, right? They don't know where stuff is. They know what they want. So they want you to help them understand how to navigate the store to find a thing that they've already maybe pre-selected, and then help expedite their process of checkout. That's a really good example of location data to help provide super value for the customer and brand. And I was actually quite shocked that Home Depot has got their national ad campaign about their app and about that very experience.
So it's all about showing the customer that you're actually providing them value by sharing the data.
100%.
And just to build on that as well, so we'll see how many builds we can get here.
That's good.
Just to build on that, I think that Tom brings up an incredibly important point as we talk about personalization and the value that you're providing consumers. So simply asking for location, people are accustomed to thinking, okay, location, what are they going to give me? You download an app, you go to a site, whatever it is. The problem is you haven't given them an indication as to what they're getting. So we've come across that in some of our clients. very large Fortune 500 beauty brands that we work with, if you will, without naming any names, whereby they have some very powerful tools that consumers can get a tremendous amount of value for. However, what happens is they ask you for a significant amount of information before you even know what it is that you're going to get. And so you are increasing the barrier of entry for that individual to give you value before you give it to them. And so to Tom's point, I think what's really salient here is ensuring that you are providing as much insight as to what those outcomes are that somebody can experience by providing you with that data. And then it's no longer creepy. They're getting value. They know the value they're getting up front, and then you progressively build that relationship and you get more and more value exchange.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've worked with companies who are really consumer focused that actually the business case for using new personalization techniques and data is that they have to show the value to the company, but also the value to the consumer they're providing. And it's a way of kind of changing the objective function, so you're looking at both. I'd love to talk a little bit about cookie depreciation. And Laurel, going to you, as you think about onboarding new clients, are you seeing a lot more interest with the kind of idea that the value of cookies is going down? And how do you think about onboarding new clients and getting them on Infillion?
Yeah, I think we have the luxury of having an all opt-in platform, both on the media and the location side. So for us, and I want to build on something that Zubin said, and that is that value exchange is super important. So if you look at our media business, we're looking at what you get in exchange for your time, attention, and privacy. And if you look on the location side, we do the same. And that exchange is overt and transparent. And I think for us, that's been the secret to having a very valuable and very successful TrueX product. So a lot of people know TrueX. It's very overt. You know what you're getting. You know what you're opting into. You know what value you're getting in exchange for that. And we can prove that that attention was worthwhile one way or the other, or not. And I feel like that is really a simplified version of what the future holds for us.
And it's interesting, having been traveling in Europe, I think many of us may have experienced this the last few days. There's so many privacy regulations that as you just try to use the apps you use day to day, you're having to opt in. You're not even sure what you're opting into. So on that note, how are you thinking about your companies preparing for new legislation, regulations, and making it seamless, easy to consumers, but also really transparent?
Well, the good news is that when you download an app and then you register, you're authenticating who you are. So that's about as clear as possible. And I've talked to also chief security officers, and they're like, oh, we love the app. Why? Because you're authenticating your customer base. So, and then you have opportunities within the app to further understand who people are by having sort of in-app surveys, in-app messages that are showing new things and then asking questions, resetting preferences where you're giving consumers control. So in the business that we're focused on, it's a great place for brands to be.
So I think from our perspective, there are, as you mentioned, a lot of changes that have occurred and many that are occurring now and in the near future. One thing, for example, Apple announced last week, but they did it in a blog post, and so many people don't even know that this happened in their Worldwide Developer Conference. All the focus was on vision. But what they announced is that they are going to remove parameters from links in emails and messages. So in the past, you would send out a campaign and you would tag it with all sorts of UTM tags to know that who the individual was, what the source was, all that. All that's going to get stripped. So what does that mean? That means that I'm not going to know that Tom clicked on my email to go buy this product. He didn't buy it. He added it to cart, and now I can send him an email. I won't know that was Tom. So how do we react to that, right? And I think that our job, our function, is not just to blast what we can to people and get them out there to basically buy these products whenever they can. This is creating and causing us to become more mindful about what we do and how we do it, and to start think about Tom as not Tom, but as to what is Tom getting from us, right, as we mentioned earlier, and then how do we understand how to market to Tom. But what we're not going to know in the near future is what the effect of those campaigns were. Now, there are ways to get around some of these things, everybody will, but the reality is the world is changing from a privacy, well, from many perspectives, but certainly from privacy. And so it's really important to think about that from a marketing perspective, and how do you then start to target folks like Tom? I keep picking on Tom. I could pick on Laurel as well, but Tom is just next to me.
You go for it.
Yeah, but it's absolutely changing everything that we do and how we think about it.
And how does the data that you have play in a world where it's harder to target Tom?
Yeah, I think the one thing that perhaps everybody's skipping over is the idea that we want consumers to vote with their feet. We want them to say, regulations aside, we want them to vote with their feet. I would love to see 90% app usage as opposed to 10% app usage, right? And so when you think about it, this idea of self-complying, self-regulating is a much more powerful idea than just complying with, the 5 new states who came aboard or the other countries, et cetera. I think we're really trying to be proactive. Internally, we've taken lots of steps to make sure that we're moving in that direction. And so we'd like to see more efficacious work across the board, because it's way better ROAS for clients and it's way better experience for customers as well.
You heard earlier today, there was Christy from Albertsons, who runs basically Albertsons Media. Think of it as their own sort of digital exchange. They're now able to link advertising to Albertson customers and actually track, if they're app customers, what happens downstream in terms of product performance or purchase. How many times has the CEO or the CFO asked, so is this advertising working? Right, in that case, literally, because it's within their own base that they're advertising to, inside and outside the app, they can track it all the way to user behavior because it's authenticated and they can link that.
And related to this, but a little bit different, it's the creepy factor. So, how do you think about using data in a world where, and that's a great example with the app, the consumer's in it, they've decided to be there, but retargeting is always going to be is currently a very important part of advertising. And how do you get around the kind of following, I remember I said to my daughter we should go pick some basil, and I had ads for pesto coming up on my Facebook for like months. How do you get around that, and where do you think the world's going on that dimension? I'll start with Laurel, and then we can turn.
I'll say one quick thing about retargeting. I think the world of AI and machine learning gives us a fantastic opportunity, not necessarily to do the creepy follow-along retargeting thing, but to actually find more folks who are like the folks that we targeted to begin with, who might be enjoying the next experience we're willing to serve up. And that's something that I think has been unexplored, because it almost has the same connotation as the creepiness factor, but not so much. Because if I can talk to you in the next phase of your journey to purchase and skip a step for the consumer, I've now saved them a bunch of time, I've saved a bunch of their attention, and I've probably gotten them the relevance that they were looking for.
Yeah, please.
Tommy, did you make the pesto?
I did make the pesto.
And therein lies the problem.
All right.
Because remarketing works, right? Well, you were going to buy the basil anyway, right? But the point is that until we have mechanisms that will achieve what we're looking for, that consumers are happy with, people will still do what they're doing. Marketers will continue to send those blast emails. They will continue to spam until they're blocked. They will continue to do these things. And so I think that is wonderful what these groups are doing right now in terms of giving you more control as a marketer as well as a consumer.
And I guess there's a question, which is it creepy if it's really relevant, right? So, is there a degree at which, when it's so highly personalized and relevant, it no longer becomes creepy?
So I think there's a line between serving me information that relates to what I've already expressed that I'm interested in, so that has some level of value, and you taking that and then bringing all this other stuff about me from my own personal life, and now you're sending me predictive type of things, and that's where people get pretty nervous, because it's like, no, you can't go there. Yeah, I'm willing to see information about the things that I told you I'm interested in, but do not bring this other personal information into it.
Tom and I were talking about a very specific example earlier, and as trite as it may sound, we share an amusement park client, and serving that client serving that client's kids the next ride proactively on a fast track, it's a lot nicer than sending you something that says, "Dear Mr. So-and-so," because that's not personalization. And so I think the relevance factor is less about old-fashioned, personalization and DM, and more about what is that real value add, what is the delight at the end of it. And we do this for our clients. I mean, it's better to say no. We probably don't send more messages than we do send. And saying no is something, I mean, we're not so virtuous all the time, but we try.
So here's another. So that, by the way, that's a great use of location data. You're in this gigantic amusement park, and you're trying to figure out where stuff is, and to be able to know and be tracked that way is a great. But talk about personalization as it relates to push notifications. So I'm sure you all receive notifications if you've flown here or taken a train here that says we're boarding, your gate changed, hopefully your flight's not late, et cetera, et cetera. Those are push notifications that are valuable. When a brand puts someone's first name in the push notification, there's an equal tendency that people will like it or people will hate it. If you put the first name plus on, Tom, on your flight later today, or when you arrive in Paris, like something of context that's further than just Mr. Tom, Sir Tom, that gets weird because it's like fake personalization.
Can I get the message that says, "Laurel, we found your bags,
Oh, no.
BA, and we're going to deliver them to the
Let's just
Montreal
let
by
everybody-
4:30?
tags.
Put that out to
Oh,
the
sorry,
universe.
Zubin, I think you had something.
I was just going to mention something about the creep factor. So I think that there are areas in marketing and technology where you want to be on the bleeding edge. This is one where you don't. Meaning, what do consumers expect? And stay within that. Don't go beyond that. So to your point of, if you're on a site and you see, and you're looking for basil, and then you see basil somewhere else, you're going to expect that. But if you think that your phone is listening to you and somehow sending you something that isn't expected, that's, I think, where the creepy factor comes in. And so I think that it's really important as brands, as larger brands, not to go beyond what consumers expect just because there's technology out there that will allow you to.
And how do your clients police that, right? How do they make sure that they're not crossing that line?
So look, I think from one perspective, it's our approach, which is not just going with what the client wants and advising them, that's why they hire us, and being very clear on what it is that we will do and what it is that we won't do. And the other side of it is the organization themselves has to care about these things. And frankly, if they don't care about these things, then the relationship doesn't last long.
And yeah, are there some best practices for how to get someone on board and in the right way and get the behaviors and usage that you would want to see?
There are, for sure.
Yeah.
Because the brands that do it well are getting something like 35 and 40% retention off of those initial downloads, which is so much better.
Yeah. And what are some of those things that make the difference?
That first, immediately you're recognizing that person. You're asking them fundamental questions about their level of interest. You're giving them options from which to provide information. You're helping them to set preferences in terms of how, when, and where they want to be communicated with. Those are all things, they're just best practices that brands use that do it well.
That's great. And Laurel, turning to you, how do advertisers find actionable ways to deal with the fact that consumers are pretty vocal about avoiding ads?
Yeah. Oh, that was going to be part of my telling the industry things they don't want to hear.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
We know that about 2/3 of ads are ignored. We know CTV's hot, and we're expecting, that kind of attention or profound attention because people are paying attention to streaming. The sad news is sometimes I'm using the ad pod as my opportunity to do something else. And the most quoted is go to the bathroom. That is a sad statement on our business. So, I think that as we focus on how we garner attention, I think we owe it to ourselves in terms of return on advertising, you know, investment. And also, we owe the consumer a better experience. And if they really don't want it, we need to give them that option. You know, easy for us to say we run a, you know, opt-in product and we give you that opportunity and you have to prove to us and we don't get paid unless you show some interaction, and that's great for somebody like us to say. But I do think the industry, you know, especially as macroeconomic conditions have taken over and people have run more quickly to inexpensive media, it's really been about the clicks, and I don't think it's getting us anywhere. So.
How do you advise your clients in that context, Zubin?
I mean, I think that a few things to comment on. What you mentioned about clicks, I think, is really important. So what you're optimizing for is critical. And the action that most marketers optimize for are engagement KPIs and marketing KPIs that may or may not influence purchase. Mm-hmm. And the key, again, back to what Tom was mentioning, the reason Albertsons can crush it is because it's a closed loop. So they have a sense of what actually purchase looks like. The brands that do this well aren't just testing and throwing darts at the wall and see what works. They're doing it in a manner where they can actually track all the way to conversion, whether it's macro, all the data that they have out there, or micro per channel. But if you don't do that, then what you're doing is you're just optimizing for clicks and meaningless clicks. And to compound that, again, back to what I was mentioning earlier about value, it really should be about which consumers are getting the highest level of lifetime value from you, which consumers are using your products, why are they using your products, understanding that, focusing on cohorts like that, and optimizing for that, not optimizing for clicks and engagement on outside platforms.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. I was actually going to raise the lifetime value point before you brought it up. But I do think that a lot of these issues will start to be a lot clearer once we can actually have really good measures of impact on lifetime value. And also even adding in metrics about customer loyalty and things like that, because that helps you understand in that moment, I might have gotten engagement, but maybe at the expense of a bit of loyalty, or I was able to increase loyalty and engagement at the same time. And I think it's that combination of metrics and this longer term view that will help to create kind of the path that's going to, you know, be the most successful over time in this environment. So in that context, what do you think some of the biggest challenges, I mean, there is so much change going on in the industry right now. I mean, as we sit here in all these panels, it's kind of a bit head spinning and super exciting. How do you think in the next 2 years, what's going to change the most, and what are you telling your clients? I'll start with you, Laurel.
I think that closed loop, I love that I'm sitting here with the two of you because you're talking about commerce, you're taking the consumer all the way through to their satisfaction. With Tom, when we work together, I know exactly what's happening with the actual customer. Imagine that. And I think that outside of the walled gardens, we're starting to see a world where we are starting to deeply understand that consumer journey, post-omnichannel, online and off, right? And we're finally seeing the light toward the end. And I love that we're having this conversation because I can be talking about upstream media and I can be talking about pinpoint location data and have a continuous conversation now. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's great. How about you, Tom?
I'm excited about the possibility that people will finally understand that a lot of use of email is actually wasted. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a lot of the marketing clouds are highly dependent upon email. They're kind of email-centric. The single highest piece of data that consumers say they're willing to share is email. The single biggest form of communication that people will delete is email. And the reason is, especially the younger generation, they're setting up false emails. So when you send a promotional email to your customer or your prospect, they treat it as just that. Whereas if you send them a transactional email or something that has a value, confirming that you've made this purchase or congratulations that you've made, you know, another level, then that's a good email. And I think that there's a lot of waste, and I don't know how many messages, Tracy, I think you've got 13,612 or something, yeah, in your inbox. I mean, and people want to reach Tracy, and she's only been at the company 7 months or 9 months or something crazy, and she's not opened 13,000. I hope none of them were mine, but okay. But the point is that's real life.
So I think that in terms of excitement and caution and all of that, what to look for the next 2 years, the platforms, in addition to the privacy rules that are coming, so there's privacy compliance regulation, as well as what the platforms are doing, vis-a-vis Apple. What they're forcing brands to do is to rely on themselves and build within, as opposed to relying on data outside, which is, back to Tom's point, what consumers want as well. They want you to have that relationship with them, not get third-party data on me, leverage someone else's relationship that I have to get to me. So I think that that's the most exciting opportunity. Now, from an infrastructure standpoint, what they're building inside, strategically what they have to do, they need to do this because, again, most brands selling in retail are realizing that retailers are building their own closed-loop networks where not only are they taking part of your margin, now you have to advertise with them, now they're getting all the first-party data, you don't know who you are, so they're getting squeezed from a margin perspective, so the only thing that they can do is to build their own environments, build their own first-party data capture, and ultimately, it benefits the consumer because they're building a relationship direct with the consumer as opposed to outsourcing it.
Got it. And one thing that we didn't really talk about, but I'd love to get your thoughts on, is the impact of social media and the fact that I often tell my clients now that brands are increasingly losing control of the narrative around their brand. And it's getting more and more crafted by the end consumer, either through social media, review sites. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Gen AI and how it's going to optimize search and things like that. So in that context, how are you thinking about advising your clients? I'll go to Laurel first.
Yeah, I think it's funny, to build on that, when we were having the Albertsons conversation this morning, I was thinking about the fact that aggregators are coming into the market, taking a company who's close to the customer further away from the customer again. So there's a lot of loss of control being felt, whether it's social or it's in aggregation. You know, is Instacart a friend or a foe to retail media networks? Or to retail. At the end of the day, I think that the brand principles that we're sort of leaving behind, we need to be pulled back to the fore. And I think that's because we're so focused on performance right now, like ultra focused on performance, that some of the brand principles need to come back into play. And I think we're getting there. I think we'll get to the place where everything's back on balance and that brand has a bigger voice in the equation over the long run because we can measure it finally.
Yeah. It's a great point. Tom?
I'll try to answer your question maybe tangentially. So what we know about social media is the powerful reach and the continuous conversation that takes place. I remember when I was at Sprinkler a bunch of years ago, and we were trying to let executives understand that, like, it's not what we say anymore, it's what they say, and they're speaking. All the women's magazines, as an example, in total reach 18 million subscribers, whereas, Kim Kardashian has 85 million followers. Like, it was like, okay, so the world's different, so you need to accept it. Now, what we know about social media is that there is this continuous conversation, which means that marketers need to understand that, and they need to be able and want to be able to do more often. And what's fascinating, particularly as it relates to like the app, is they have historically been highly dependent on the most scarce resource that exists on the planet, and those are developers. They're reliant on developers to get stuff done and make changes and for them to want to interact more often. And one of the things that we think as a trend is going to be the move from HTML to what's known as native and no code, which allows non-technical people like marketers to be able to engage in those moments that matter and do a heck of a lot more. So I think you can learn from social media in terms of that continuous kind of conversation, those continuous experiences, and now apply it without having to rely on these people who don't have the time.
So I think it's a myth that brands have ever had control.
Oh, that's a provocative point.
I think that consumers have always had conversations without the brand. And social media is giving you an opportunity to be in the conversation. So now you can see what they're talking about with your brand. You can get involved in the conversation. You can communicate, et cetera. Because the reality is, you put advertising out there, you do everything about your brand, ultimately your product speaks for itself, and hopefully you do all these things. But then people have conversations about your brand. They go home and they talk about Peloton. They talk to somebody else about Peloton. It doesn't matter what Peloton says to me while I'm consuming their content or their classes or anything. It's about what I say about Peloton. But what social media does is allows Peloton to now listen and see what it is that I'm talking about it, and not only listen, but also participate and comment and elevate. And so I think what's happening is, while brands, to Laurel's point, need to do more about understanding what it is that they actually deliver in a consumer's life, they can actually understand that far more by listening than they can by trying to do it in a boardroom. And then to Tom's point, it's about reaction and how quickly can they react. So the technology is allowing them now, as marketers, as folks within the company, to react directly as opposed to a third party, in this case being developers.
Yeah, I think they're such great and important points. And when you said brand is back, basically, that really resonated, because great brands are made from great products and great experiences, right? And what you all are talking about is, how do we use data in a way that ultimately creates a great experience for the customer, such that it creates even more affinity for the brand itself. And I think that's going to be a really, really important thing over the next few years, as customers are trying to figure out kind of which way is up in this new world. So I think that we're getting a little bit close to the end. I would love to make sure we hear kind of some parting thoughts from each of our panelists. And, what are you, we talked a little bit about what you're excited about, but as you think about where your priorities are going to be and where your clients' priorities are going to be, what's the next couple of years look like, and what are you going to be focused on?
Our focus will certainly be on the products that deliver what the customer wants, and it will be incredibly transparent that they're enjoying it, that they're feeling like they want to opt in, and that we will continue to deliver the value exchange we promise, which is not only to respect, but to do our best to make sure their time, attention, and privacy are exactly at the level of engagement that they want.
How about you, Tom?
Well, going back to something Maya Angelou said, people never forget how you make them feel. And so the experiences that we all have with brands are really what it's all about. And our view is that the app is the centerpiece of where those experiences are. And if you understand that, because I've authenticated, you know who I am, I've shared this information, if you get those experiences right, then I will reward you with loyalty. So that's...
And actually, I'm excited to hear the wrap up from Zubin, but I wanted to stop on one point there. So you talked about how important the app is, and that is definitely clear. What about brands that, what's the bar for the app to be important enough for a consumer? And what's a company to do if, they're just not as important in that person's life that they feel the need to download the app? Or how do you get over that?
Well, I think so.
And I work with insurance companies a lot, so that's what I'm thinking about. It's hard to get the customer to download the insurance app because they really don't want to think about their insurance.
It's actually a really good reason to download the app, because one of the things you know about the insurance industry is you don't want to talk to an insurance person, right? A salesperson, right? You'd rather just deal with it in a non-personal way. I don't know. That's an answer that comes to
It's a
mind.
different kind of frictionless, isn't it?
So
Exactly.
it's about finding the real reason that it's valuable to that customer to make the time investment to do it. And so I think what you're saying is most brands can find a way, if they're relevant to consumers, to give them that reason.
Yeah, and look, there's so much learning out there. We are the customer, right? We all have apps. We all have phones. We all have apps. We use our apps every day, from morning to night. Just think about what you're going to do today. From morning to night, you're on an app. And so you will have an experience. You might share it with other people. We all are shaped by our last best experience. And brands need to be aware of that, right? They need to actually go outside of their own space. Maybe in the insurance industry, you've got the best practice. But somebody else, believe me, there's someone else out there, some disruptor out there that's going to take the practices from another industry and apply it into the insurance industry and completely change the game.
Yeah.
100%.
I have an insurance thought and a final thought. Okay. The insurance thought is, to Tom's point, it's downloading an app is one thing. coming back to the app is another thing. So relevant content, content that gives somebody value, and whatever that value could mean. From an insurance perspective, for example, you have all sorts of discounts that they offer based on safe driving and good driving. So imagine that once a year, somebody comes into your app, or once a quarter, and if they take a certain class on your app, you're going to incentivize them with something. You're going to get far more adoption that way. You're going to get usage that way because they are learning something, and you in turn are giving them some value. So that's my insurance thought. My final thought is that AI, and everyone's obviously been talking about AI all week, and they will for the next year. But here's the thought about AI, that AI is going to add a lot more noise, and so you can leverage it. So AI is going to allow everyone to do generative art, and everyone's going to do generative ads and generative messages and everything that are, for the most part, all going to be quite similar. And that's going to be your noise. There are ways that we don't know right now, maybe you do, I don't, of leveraging AI to actually put out more human-centric content and distinguish yourself from that noise. So I think what's really going to be interesting is how AI levels the playing field at one point, but then those that are using it the right way, and perhaps those that aren't using it at all, will be able to distinguish themselves from those that become the common layer.
Yeah, it's a great point. I often think we're about to undergo this transformation from what we all knew it's a human front line, the great folks in stores that served with empathy and intelligence and could read you in the moment, to the digital front line. And so how do we create a digital front line that has that kind of personalization, empathy, humanity, such that consumers want to interact with that brand? I think that's going to be a key challenge for all of us over the next few years.
A quick point on that. I said it was a final thought, but this is the real final thought. There was a study conducted recently on physicians, comparing physicians reading charts and speaking to patients versus AI. And the thing that was the most remarkable wasn't that AI did a great job in terms of analyzing the results and sharing it with the patient. It's that the AI actually was more empathetic with the patient than the physician who's overworked, who's working 80 hours a week, who doesn't have time for that patient. Yeah. And so in speaking to physicians about this, what they've told me is they love this because it will allow them to see more patients and spend more time with patients than they are analyzing data.
If only we could get that for tired parents. Well, thank you all. And I don't know, I think we have a few minutes if we had any questions. Sure.
We've seen the rise. We've seen the rise of product market fit, and the SaaS companies doing those surveys, and I get a kick out of it because I now have direct access to hopefully fix the problems that I have in that app, which is great. And then we've seen, I live in Europe and it's terrible. Like banking apps here, you've got a great job. Like go to SocGen and change that app like tomorrow. They'll market to me in French. They won't let me change it. The app is in French. There is no personalization at all. And it's just a huge opportunity. So I see, the cookies, the debate happening right now, and saying, well, why don't we double down on loyalty like the airlines do? Like those loyalty schemes are incredible, but retail has really done a really piss poor job of, loyalty applications. So I'd just like your view on, doubling down on loyalty and having like a loyalty scheme in a retail context.
Well, it comes back to the fundamentals. So there's this value exchange between consumer and brand that's based on respect and reward. Reward's really important. So how do I provide loyalty? I provide loyalty if I get some level of reward. So I'm not sure what those would be necessarily for Société Générale. I didn't pronounce that properly locally, but SocGen. SocGen, there you go. But it could be, I don't know, it could be as a loyal customer, you're entitled to a special rate for some period of time. It could be that because you have, 2 accounts, by adding a third account, you get something of additional value, personal service or whatever it might be, private client group type of thing. Anyway, those are just some initial thoughts.
Could I raise a point about product market fit? I do think that we should listen and learn from the past. I think the airline loyalty example is a good one. However, think about how homogenized it is. And I feel like in the upfront exercise around product market fit, what does the customer really want? We have an obligation not to fast follow and become homogenous like everybody else does. And so I'm looking for real, with all this data available, I'm looking for genuine brand innovation and authentic, differentiation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the issues that I've seen is companies aren't comfortable testing their way into a loyalty program. They just want to go out there and have it all designed with all the tiers and things
That
like
tactic works. Yeah.
right? So I personally would love to see more companies really test their way into a loyalty program. JetBlue's kind of done that a bit in the US with Mosaic, and there's really not a ton of value, but it's really gamified and kind of cool, and it seems to be working. So I think there's a ton of opportunity there, but it can't be the traditional, as you said, scheme of the past, if you will. Any other questions?
I'll ask a question. What brand is doing it really, really well from your perspectives? From an app perspective, like who's really crushing it?
I have one that I don't think they have a loyalty program. I've been impressed with how broad Etsy is, but how personalized their recommendation engine has become. And I think is a little messy, to be honest, and needs some cleaning up. But I'm pretty impressed with not wasted personalization. And I don't know it well enough to say how they're doing it, but it certainly intrigues me enough to figure it out.
So it would be the company whose brand I used to wear when I was playing tennis in these parts of the world, Nike. So not too long ago, Nike was threatened by this company called Amazon that was going to sell Nike sneakers. And they were going to disintermediate their relationship with the customer because the only relationship they had was maybe in store. Typically, you don't know who you are when you go to a store, but maybe online. And so what did they do? They created a digital lab that built direct-to-consumer apps. The sneaker app is a membership-only app, right, where you get exclusive opportunities to buy the latest limited edition shoes. The running app, right, the Nike Training Club. So they are doing a great job because they continue to drive subscription, they continue to drive value, and if you think about what Nike stands for, Just Do It is actually to treat every person as an athlete for whatever it is you choose to do. And so there's that, you're not this elite athlete, but you're just a human being that's just getting off your bottom, to get off and go for a walk or go for a jog or take a class or whatever it might be. And I think they do a really good job of treating people individually that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of brands don't realize how much they're leaving on the table by not having better apps for direct sales. Because when you look at the margin, it's just enormous. And Nike, I think, has figured that out.
Yeah, I think their digital sales have surpassed 50% of all sales
Yeah,
in just a few years. And the margin,
it's much better.
much better.
Any other questions? Well, thank you to all of our panelists today. Really insightful and exciting times. And thanks, everyone, for coming. Been a pleasure to have you all here.
Thank you. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.